Today we're going to analyze a myriad of scenes from different shows to describe what parts of direction and art either inhibit or aid the meaning of these scenes. To get into specifics, we'll take a look at some of the scenes I think are great and some that are not so great. I'm in no way an expert in analyzing direction or animation, and this video is strictly opinionated. There's no objective formula that makes a graphic scene good or bad, but there are definitely certain aspects that benefit or detriment a scene in particular. The first show we're going to be talking about is the murder of the Guardians of the Globe has got to be one of the weakest points of graphic animation in Invincible. To clarify, I'm not talking about the realism of the fight, or how the Guardians could have won. That doesn't matter. I'm also not saying that the Guardians dying was a bad thing. Red Rush has the best death of them all. When the fight turns around, the music gets darker and more eerie. You could see his struggle. His hands get crushed. Nolan's face here is drawn pretty well. And although I think the gore itself is kind of lame, this violence is pretty impactful. But everything else after that kinda isn't. This isn't about the story. It's just about how dry the presentation is. It's a pretty good hook for the show, but the fight choreography is genuinely uninteresting. A lot of the time, the characters are just standing there waiting to die. What happens is they stay completely still, no interesting expressions, Nolan rushes to them, they die. Again, completely still, boring expressions, they die. This just makes me not care about the Guardians of the Globe. There's no emotional depth to this scene. It's like the characters don't care they're being slaughtered. These are people. These are friends that have known each other for 20 years. It's not fighting another villain. It's fighting someone they trusted and cared about. And they're seeing their friends get killed around them. For such a charged and well-written scene, it deserves direction that conveys such emotion. Their deaths needed to humanize them as characters. Make it so they had meaning. The show clearly tries to do that later on with distinct emotional scenes with Debbie and Olga. The show does a pretty good job at making their deaths important after the fact. It just doesn't let it go, which is great. I just can't get over the direction of the scene itself. I'm just gonna clarify here before I go forward. Invincible is a great show. I love Mark as a protagonist, with one of his greatest strengths being his humanity and empathy, a theme that resonates with me deeply. And the story is wonderful as well. I just think the show falls flat when it comes to direction. The animation can be done well, but that doesn't change my opinion that the show looks flat and that the character acting is bland most of the time. Now let's take a look at a scene that I believe is directed quite well. The confrontation between Mark and Nolan. To clarify, since this part of the episode is quite long, we'll be jumping around a little. Some of the issues I have with the show are still present, but the backdrops are just much more interesting to look at. Just because the Guardians of the Globe scene was within their headquarters does not mean that it had to be drawn in a flat and uninteresting manner. I'll say this, I'm not a director, animator, or any of those things, but the framing and the backdrop of this shot with Mark and Nolan is just so much more interesting, and it shows you a lot more about their dynamic, adding more visual and emotional depth, and a sense of seriousness that just isn't present in the Guardians of the Globe scene. Obviously, a confrontation between Mark and his dad is going to be more emotional. Oh, note that difference. But the show does a much better job at making it look interesting rather than lame and a little edgy. Compared to other shows, the character acting and facial expressions are still a little flat, but they're so much more interesting than the Guardians of the Globe scene. Honestly, their character models are just a lot more fixed. The way they look deviates very little from their character design, and I just think that's very creatively restrictive. One thing I'll definitely say is that the blood looks darker here. Even though it may be due to the lighting of the scene in general, it makes it look far less cartoonish than the Guardians of the Globe scene. Taking a step away from Invincible, we're now going to talk about another graphic show, that being Attack on Titan. This show off the bat has genuinely amazing direction and presentation of its more graphic scenes. In my opinion, they're very profound and deeply emotional, even from the first episode. Even the lighting leading up to the Titans' attack fills you with a sense of impending doom, which is just such a great build-up for an emotional or graphic scene. There's a wide variety of emotional and striking facial expressions from all of the important characters. Seeing that the characters actually care through the art makes me want to care. The first view of the smiling Titan is absolutely haunting. And again, the characters' faces are drawn so well. They're extremely dynamic. With this shot, it shows you how you can make more interesting creative decisions while sticking with the same setting. No, the black backdrop isn't real. It's framed to show us how horrifying, insurmountable, and daunting a Titan is. Moving back to Carla, we're shown layers of emotion and thought. Then we move on to an absolutely raw feeling the animation of her being lifted from the rubble. There's a real but ultimately helpless struggle for survival, making Carla not just feel like a plot tool to be thrown out, but like an actual person. And Aaron's reaction amplifies that. The actual violence of the scene is animated in such a beautifully yet terrifying way that makes the scene just such a wonderful hook for the series, in contrast to Invincible. Let me just go out and say, I'm not an Attack on Titan glazer, it's not my favorite show in the whole world, but me being able to comment on it like this goes to show how wonderfully directed the scene is, and how it could amplify the emotions of a story tenfold. Animation as a medium has so many creative possibilities, but a lot of the time, whether it be executives or some other explanation, I don't have a full understanding of the production cycle, simply do not use it to its full potential. My look at this next scene will be a little shorter, because it doesn't exemplify violence as much as the others, but it serves to stand as a comparison to my other examples. We're going to be looking at Annie's betrayal scene. These characters show much more genuine reactions to their betrayal. You can feel their emotion, which serves the preceding scene of Aaron much better. Even the blood itself feels more serious. I'm going to take a small moment to say that if you're enjoying the video so far, you should subscribe to our channel. Leave a like, leave a comment, and hype up the video. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright. With this next show, we're gonna have to acknowledge some bias on my part. Yes, this channel has made dozens of ReZero videos, and it is my favorite anime. But I just have to say, whether it be emotional or terrifying, this show handles violence extremely well. There's not one moment I could think of where I thought it looked edgy or underbaked. Let's start with episode 1, as it's only fair. We did it with all the other ones. The beginning of the scene is immediately juxtaposed from the conversation between Emilia and Subaru and the sounds of crickets in the background, to the complete stillness of the loot house, paired with a shot of Emilia's face transitioning into a straight black screen as Subaru enters. The lighting builds an eerie tone, and as Subaru walks, we hear a slight splash. Then, from the silence, the music picks up, immediately as he notices a pool of blood on the floor. The sound design, the harsh lighting, and Subaru's facial expression all build up this feeling of dread and imminent danger. The sound of his panic is only broken up by the sadistic voice of the assailant. Then, he is struck, rolling across the ground. He only then notices the heat of his blood pouring out of his body, as his breathing ramps up, then vomiting blood. The backdrop, while remaining in the same location, is very dynamic with its lighting, and the camera angles and effects all reveal Subaru's emotions. His will, his fear, his strength, his weakness, making this part of the episode just so great overall. Moving on to a more emotional scene, we have Rem and Ram's attack on Subaru. We'll start with Subaru fleeing from Rem under a red sky facing towards the sun. His expression has depth and emotion. His reactions are extreme and genuine. His dark crimson blood paints the ground. The voice acting is stellar in both Japanese and English, and his confusion and pain is built up by Rem's actions. The scene transitions from horror to emotional pain from her betrayal. You could see both Subaru's anger and sadness all throughout, juxtaposed by Rem's cold expression. Then we jump to Subaru's pained confusion at Rem's yelling. This is the reaction of a young man who feels betrayal, a young man who feels the sadness, the anger, the confusion, and the shock of being attacked by someone he felt was precious to him. That is how you show violence, through genuine emotion communicated through amazing direction, character acting, and sound design. I just love this scene so much. Although a lot of people praise other episodes, and they definitely deserve it, this one is just so powerful. To conclude, each of these graphic scenes have different context, and I am in no way saying that each and every tool used in any of them can be perfectly applied to other scenes. However, I chose these scenes because they have certain things in common. All of these shows contain a graphic, violent hook in their first episode. This context is important because viewers upon watching the first episode have about the same amount of investment in the series. Something like a much later character death is given build-up from the rest of the series. Essentially, my point is that the Invincible Guardians of the Globe scene could have been so much more impactful, despite it being in the first episode. I just don't think it's a valid excuse for it feeling kind of meaningless and done for shock value. Let me clarify again, this is my opinion, but the first episodes of ReZero and Attack on Titan feel much more emotionally grabbing to me. And even looking past the first episodes, Invincible's direction of violence just feels so shallow in comparison. If we compare the scenes of Nolan versus the Guardians of the Globe, Nolan versus Mark, Aaron versus Annie, and Rem versus Subaru, you can see how flat the expressions are in Invincible, with all sharing the context of betrayal. You can see I'm focusing on emotion a lot, and that's because the emotions make the violence more meaningful. It sets it up the same way camera work and artwork does. Yeah, I'm criticizing Invincible here, but the writing is actually good. The presentation just doesn't match it. Do you get what I'm saying? If not, that's cool. It's kinda hard to communicate something as subjective as this. I hope you didn't find my commentary worthless, because I think it's pretty important when looking at these violent scenes, and how each of them carry weight. If you enjoyed the video, I recommend subscribing, liking, leaving a comment, and hyping it up. It would be very appreciated. We have loads of other like it, so if you're interested, check them out.